Welcome, everybody. This is EchoWorks' continuing webinar series, and today we're going to be covering migration of PGP encryption to the cloud with ease. So we're going to try to cover off some of the challenges and benefits of taking PGP encryption to the cloud and how EchoWorks helps you streamline that process and makes it very efficient. Today I'm here with Sarah Happe, who's Director of Client Engagement and works with many of our major customers around PGP encryption and how to enable it in the cloud.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I guess client engagement is a great blend of customer success and technical onboarding and being just that point of contact for our VIP customers to make sure they're getting everything they need from the platform. So I'm dealing with all of our configuration, all of our delivery methods, and definitely the topics like PGP and SMIME, because they need some additional information and instructions sometimes, right? It's not just a basic portal use case, which we also do a lot of in the platform, but there's going to be those cases where customers need more than just the basic encryption, and that's where we come in to help them with all of those use cases, PGP especially.
Great, thanks, Sarah. My name is Chris Peel. I'm a VP of Customer Engineering, and I work a lot with our customers in the pre-sales and active and onboarding process to understand their needs and requirements, working hand in hand with a lot of the engagement team as we transition them from a pre-sales to an activation. Another role I play is I look at our customers and try to understand their needs and requirements, and I play a bit of a thought leadership role in terms of product roadmap and direction. So with today, EchoWorks does offer a lot of different encryption options, as Sarah has talked about, but we're going to try to drill down more on a specific use case around PGP or certificate-based encryption. And we see this use case, as Sarah has indicated, as more of a unique kind of use case, particularly around B2B, or where customers are using more traditional certificate-based encryption requirements based on business requirements. So let's take a further look. So we've talked a bit about who we are, and let's take a little bit background, take a look at what are the challenges of running PGP on-prem. Sarah, maybe you would like to comment what you've kind of seen in terms of when we talk to customers, what are some of those challenges or what are some reasons that they're looking at removing on-prem PGP and why would they want to take it to the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Definitely, customers are looking for modern email encryption nowadays. They've managed to do PGP or SMIME encryption. They've done it on-prem. They're using technology that was developed a long time ago. Mm-hmm. It's hard to manage. They lose the expertise with employees leaving and new employees coming. And it's a burden. It's a burden to keep these systems reliable, sustained, redundant. When they were developed, they were meant to be just sort of like a box in the corner. And that doesn't work today.
Yeah, I would say that one of the main issues in PGP was in the rise of PGP back in the 70s and the 80s. A lot of that was built as an enterprise grade sort of solution set, meaning in those days everything was on-prem. So I think there's two challenges with the on-prem PGP. The first challenge is it's enterprise-centric, which meaning it was deployed on servers on-prem. So that ongoing cost of ownership and management is there. And then the depletion of resources and technology or technical people to manage it has been an ongoing issue. And we see that really kind of across the board. I mean, that's the whole move to cloud essentially, right? Like what we can streamline, we can put in the cloud. Yeah. And I think that the other major issue is PGP is an old technology. And when we look at a lot of the enterprise-based customers, things like PGP Universal, which is probably the dominant solution we saw in enterprise, that's kind of gone out of support. It isn't really updated. It still operates like it was developed in 1990 or early 2000. Yeah. And so they need to modernize that. And that includes not just cloudifying it, but is it current and is it kept up to date?
And also, how do you integrate other cloud solutions with this on-premise PGP appliance? Yeah. Like, does your mail flow to a gateway before or after the PGP appliance? Neither of them really work very well. You don't want your emails encrypting on-prem or at the desktop anymore. Because it blocks you from doing all of the great hygiene and inspection in DLP in the cloud.
So you're speaking, I guess, really that's where EchoWorks plays a lot is boundary-based encryption, right? So we see that encrypting at rest at the point of sending is not in vogue anymore because it does cause issues. We've seen customers come to us, for instance, MUFG, which we're doing encryption at the point of sending, and it blinds them to DLP. Yeah. And PGP brings a particularly painful aspect, right? Inbound communications can't be scanned. Outbound communications can't be compliant for DLP. And so we see customers wanting to migrate to the cloud. Partly before that, I think is one main reason. We did a project with Bird & Bird, a major law firm in the EU, where they were talking about operational costs, right? The cost to run those servers and manage it as well. patching and upgrading. And so there was this whole process of how do we get this to the cloud, but keep that same level of functionality. And so that's a key aspect of it here.
And when that technology or that old server has been around for so long, it's not getting any new development.
Nope.
It's not necessarily getting security patches.
Correct.
And when the customer wants support for that appliance, does the company who owns it now even know how to support it very well?
Yeah. Again, security patches is now the vogue, right? Like constant patching and availability of services. Take the Log4j instance, right? That was prolific in terms of all the places that it touched, all the applications built on it. If you're running old legacy code on a PGP server and it's not being upgraded or updated, or you can't get an update, you're going to be out of compliance,
really
right?
risky.
And things like PCI and GDPR demand that you are. So we see customers moving to the cloud, and none of this is really rocket science. Everybody knows this, right? We see this with the Exchange and the cloudification of everything. And so what we see with EchoWorks is that we kind of fit into that whole cloudification process, right? EchoWorks was built on cloud. We were building cloud first, right? So when we look at encryption solutions in PGP and S/MIME being the same, we're already built that way. So we sort of use that thing. So let's talk a little bit about like what are some of the functionalities around PGP encryption that you need, whether it's cloud or on-prem, but when we take it EchoWorks to cloud, Sarah, what are some of the things that you talk about with our customers that meet their requirements to move it to the cloud?
Well, just when you think of just regular operation of PGP encryption, what do you need? You need keys to roll over seamlessly, right? You want a service that is taking care of it and not involving the actual staff or employees.
Right. So
they shouldn't even need to know that it's happening, ideally.
So automatic kind of
when you're running encryption in the cloud and it is tiered with the other delivery methods that you want to make use of, nobody should make a decision of should this be a PGP email or not. You don't want the individual having to decide that.
So this ability then to encase the business requirements around encryption to be able to, and that's one thing EchoWorks does, right? We have sort of a policy-based encryption capability, right?
Yeah.
And so that helps you, like, for instance, if I'm sending, we know, for instance, a lot of customers talk, say, to Bank of England, or we have other customers who talk, for instance, Lex Auto talks to Siemens. They've dictated that they must talk PGP or S/MIME. We can automate or force that encryption. What happens if that's unavailable? How can EchoWorks deal with that?
Exactly. I mean, it can be so simple to say, if PGP is possible, then do it all the time.
Yeah.
Like that can just be a blanket rule. For all of my emails, try PGP. If you can find the key, excellent. Why not use it?
Yeah.
Otherwise, fall back. Fall back to a delivery like the secure portal.
Yeah.
Fall back to a PDF push. Those are decisions the customer gets to make when they're working with the engagement team on onboarding, right? We're going to present all of those options, and they can be basic, global for the whole enterprise, or they can say, no, there's particular teams that need this PGP.
Yeah.
There's teams that don't. There's recipient domains that need this PGP and those that don't.
Can we do things, again, we can do things also like domain-based encryption. You're just touching on that, where maybe it's not so much end-user certificate encryption, but for this domain I want to encrypt.
Oh, that too, for sure. That's a key feature of a PGP and S/MIME service, is that it can support domain-based certificates and keys and use them to communicate with an entire organization.
So we've been talking a lot about keys and certificates. So maybe we want to talk a bit about, how do we migrate in? Like, how do we,
exactly.
What
So
about key management?
That's the steady state, right? When
That's
you're already up
big,
in the cloud. And it's important to note too that customers are coming to EchoWorks for PGP even if they didn't have a legacy appliance beforehand. Right? There's two aspects to PGP encryption. There's let me migrate what I had and continue doing it. But there's also just the net new, hey, now that I'm on a platform that offers it, I can just turn it on, and I don't need to have assets that I'm migrating. So, but that migration piece is important to help them come to cloud when they've been doing it for years already. And so the most important sort of migration step that is specific to PGP or S/MIME is how are they getting those credentials out of the on-premise appliance and being able to continue using them in the cloud? Do they have to start over completely and renew everybody's key all on day one that they're in the cloud? Because that's a little disruptive, right? Because then now you're communicating out to all your business partners that you've been doing PGP with for a long time saying, oh, all our keys changed. Sorry, you need to import new ones. So if we can enable a migration process, then that allows the customer to barely even have to tell anyone that it's happened, right? All their third parties can just continue communicating with those same PGP keys, because now they exist in EchoWorks.
Yeah, so we'll cover that a little bit more in higher, or a little bit more detail in a later slide. But to your point, like we just did a project, interesting enough, with Clydesdale Bank, which is part of Virgin Money, where they were using EchoWorks already for their outbound message encryption, and they had a legacy PGP encryption solution on-prem. It was easy for them to fold that functionality into the EchoWorks platform because it's multiplicity in delivery, it's omni-channel encryption capability. And the PGP was folded into EchoWorks. They were able to migrate the keys off the legacy system, verify that functionality, and almost seamlessly allowed the outbound communication to continue over that PGP channel to those particular customers. And key things like when we can actually then, once we're there, the key management is also integrated into the platform. So that means as those legacy keys expired, EchoWorks was already rolling over those keys and regenerating them automatically.
Yes. Automatic
right?
generation and renewal is key. Yes.
Yeah, and including publishing those also into an LDAP directory allows sort of bi-directional key lookup. And those are kind of key things. So certificate importation, key generation, LDAP publishing, are all part of what EchoWorks does, auto key rollover, as well as things like even if you have portal and PDF encryption, even allowing end recipients to self-manage. And I say that's another key aspect as well, right? Self-management in any platform is key today because we want to lower that support call. And so when
the administrator involvement, right? Administrators shouldn't have to import every key into the console, right? If it can be offered to the end recipients, those external business partners or contacts, they're getting a message for the first time. They register into the platform, and they can be presented with an option to choose PGP or certificate encryption in general, and provide their cert to the platform. So again, this can be a seamless operation that is happening day to day as needed. The administrator didn't have to get involved, and again, the sender didn't have to know anything about it. The sender doesn't need to know if the message is going to go to the portal or it's going to go as PGP. Right?
And the intelligence is built right on the edge of the system or solution. So just in general, just to sum it, what do we mean by boundary encryption, right? Without getting into specifics of flow. So essentially, any user within your organization can compose a message and send it out. Now, they may or may not trigger that encryption. That encryption can be triggered by the user if you elect it to. They can have an option just to secure it through an optional plugin or tag it with a headering, or the DLP or your SEG gateway can do it. And so one of our partners, like Mimecast, for instance, we've done a lot of direct integrations with them. That SEG gateway does the determination and routes it out. So that means outbound communications are still in the clear. We talked about this earlier. So journaling and archiving, even if those things are cloud-based, will still continue to work. But then once it's determined that that message needs to be encrypted, either by the sender or the DLP engine, we use TLS to deliver it to the cloud. So this is a standard integration technology that we see today in the cloud, and then we apply that encryption. And at the outbound boundary, we can use public certificates that may have been uploaded by recipients. We can look into external directories to find those certificates on the fly, and then we'll generate certificates for the senders automatically, and then deliver the outbound PGP. So from an external perspective, they're receiving a fully signed and encrypted PGP message. On the inbound, the communication is kind of reversed a little bit, right? The inbound PGP message is detected by your SEG gateway. If it determines it's encrypted, it routes to EchoWorks. EchoWorks does the decryption and then routes it back. So the inbound communication also complies with AVAS. It also complies with journaling and archiving. But the really important thing from a usability perspective is that message is easily delivered to the internal recipient. And that means that he's receiving and sending messages like he normally would. And whether he's on his iPhone or an iPad, all the security compliance is still there, but the transportability and ubiquitous of access to that message is there. And this is what really helps allow you to implement things like PGP or SMIME without having the need to have specialized desktop software or distribute keys. And this is a big cost saving.
And even to not have to change your SPF and DKIM, because you can think of your gateway, whether it be M365 or a Mimecast, a Proofpoint, it is your authoritative delivery point. It is your edge. And then there's a special route or connector carved basically to and from the EchoWorks cloud back to that no end user needs to see or be aware of. So all of the reporting and tracking of message flow is still in your gateway.
And there's another thing too, when we talk about certificate-based encryption, is signing, right? We can talk about encryption and signing, but what kind of the options, maybe we should discuss a little bit the different kind of signing options that we can allow for within EchoWorks.
Sure. Well, when you think of PGP, what could sign the email? Obviously, best case scenario is that the sender's email address has an associated key,
Right.
and it is signing the message, because then you have real authenticity, right?
Yeah.
The message is from Peel at EchoWorks, it's been signed by Peel at EchoWorks,
Yeah.
and it will be trusted as such. When that's not possible, there are fallback options, right? EchoWorks could sign with an enterprise key.
Right.
We see this actually more commonly with the SMIME scenario than the PGP,
Right.
mainly because in the EchoWorks platform, every sender can have a key auto-generated for them.
Right.
So there's not much need to sign with anything else,
Right.
right? You're going to just sign with the best key
Yeah.
that is there.
Right.
But if SMIME, if auto-generation isn't happening,
Mhm.
and they haven't uploaded keys, that came from a third party,
Yeah.
then an enterprise key makes a lot of sense. And it's still better than having no signature, because now that message has been signed by the company,
Yeah.
so to speak,
Yeah.
with a generic, company address.
Yeah.
And then the recipient is going to see, okay, well, the signature is good. It just wasn't signed by the person who sent it.
And you discussed the importance of signature is kind of critical in message encryption, right? Because signatures give what we call non-repudiation. So it lets you verify that the sender is the sender, right? So signature has a lot of value. Encryption protects the content, but signature gives you proof of sender. And this is a key thing. So whether PGP does this, as well as SMIME, right, from that perspective.
Yeah.
And when, we talked about auto key generation in PGP, but auto key generation SMIME is also something EchoWorks is bringing to the table as well. So that's something that's in our future release.
for next year.
Yeah. And that'll give some parity here. And that means that full digital signature and non-repudiation for outbound communications will be part of everything we do.
And then if you just think of the inbound scenarios too about signatures.
Yes, that's the key
right?
thing too.
It gets a little muddy at first to think, okay, but how am I verifying signatures when they're being decrypted at a gateway?
Yeah, good point.
So how does the internal user actually find out if that inbound message was trusted?
Yeah.
Was there an expired cert? Was it an invalid cert? So what we've worked on is being able to add some brandable, customizable footers to the bottom of an email. It has been decrypted at the gateway. So the signature's gone, the encryption is gone,
but the user
but
can be
a footer can be added to say this arrived encrypted, it was valid, it was trusted, or in the reverse, be careful about this message, right?
So
there's something wrong with the trust on this.
Exactly. So you can take sort of the onus of understanding out of the user's hand and sort of wrap the right communication. Like if the message is decrypted, this has been secured and verified. If there was some value, if the certificate was used when it was already expired or revoked, we can then include, hey, this message has been decrypted for you, but we can't verify. The non-repudiation is at question here, and therefore you need to question it. So again, when you think about security and compliance, the last thing you want to do as we talk about phishing is that somebody may send you, hey, please transfer this money, but you can't trust the signature, you know not to deal with it. So this sort of key things. And again, so EchoWorks continues to build on the platform. So we talk about key generation, we talk about, for SMIME, we talk about the signature stuff. So we continue to evolve this product. And so that's another key thing, right? By taking it to the cloud, EchoWorks is going to continue to move functionality along. And things like sort of what we call certificate harvesting, maybe we want to talk a bit about that, that's coming new to the platform as well.
Yes, and this is something that legacy on-premise server would have had, so customers expect it. So we recognize that we need that feature parity from what they're migrating from and coming to us. And when an inbound message arrives that has been signed by some third party, we should be sort of harvesting that certificate.
So again, here we're talking specifically the public certificate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that use it again later when there's outbound messages going. Right. So that's something that just makes a lot of sense and that every email encryption platform should have. Also, relatively new to the platform is our adoption of KMS. So what does KMS mean, right? So now you have sort of this very important
explain what KMS is first.
Enterprise-specific key that is being stored in an HSM. And it should and can be used to sort of protect the crypto of all of the user keys that are being imported into the system. So previously, an auto generation of a PGP key just happened very standalone, right? Like just the software just creates a key and there it is. But now it can be tied up and protected by this master key, so to speak, in an HSM. And that also allowed us some great new enhancements around exportability of those keys, right? A former AutoGen key was just sort of like in the database, and you couldn't get it back out. But now that there's sort of encryption using a KMS and then also decryption as you want to export it, we can offer key export for keys now that we weren't able to offer before.
So when we say KMS, really that's an Amazon term, but essentially it's HSM backed credential storage, right? So we're now leveraging sort of hardware security modules to protect the data, which helps with things like data exfiltration and better control points. And again, from an audit perspective, it gives us more auditability and more compliance. So things like GDPR and other privacy acts help us stay on top of things right there. So we've covered a lot of the technology. Let's talk a little bit more about what are the 4 fundamental steps, or what are the steps in terms of how do we bring a customer onto the platform, or how do we enable? I mean, it doesn't have to be just PGP encryption, but maybe other needs here. In broad strokes, we're going to talk a little bit about private key importation. We've talked a bit about auto key generation, maybe, so we'll touch on that a little bit again. Key lookup and configuration. So I'm going to kind of pass this back to you. Your engagement team does this all the time.
This is what we do. That's right.
This is your bread and butter, right?
Yeah. We do get asked very early in a process of onboarding, how long is this going to take? What do we need to do? What kind of resources do we need on this project? And to add the PGP component to it, it's not a drastic change, but it obviously is going to add a few steps into the onboarding. There's some special steps for a PGP migration. So I think it makes sense though that we sort of talk about just the whole migration process, right? Instead of focusing on just that one piece, like that makes sense. Coming onto the EchoWorks cloud. What does that mean? What does the customer need to do? Obviously, first step is going to be to sort of define that test and configuration phase versus a go live phase.
Sort of like acceptance testing,
right? How can the customer get some emails up to the cloud and send a PGP test message without disrupting their whole production mail flow?
So it's almost like implementing a POC that's really pre-production.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So you can just flip it over.
Well, and I mean, companies come to us with different environments. Some of them have a full separate test environment, and some of them are using their production environment to do testing, and they need to do that carefully. So we see it, both ways all the time. And so step number 1 is going to be sort of that defining what is the email routing of your test, of your acceptance testing. Is it going to be just a few mailboxes in production, or is it going to be your test domain? Right. And that is going to be configured and connected to the EchoWorks cloud from your existing gateway. You're not going right from your desktops. Typically you're not going right from Exchange even. You might be, but if there's any other gateway in place, then that's going to be the
connector point.
So the connector point to the EchoWorks cloud.
Standard cloud integration point, right? Where you've got a connector and a defined route, and that defined route will be enforced TLS. We won't allow inbound connections unless it's TLS. So that secures the channel into the cloud.
Exactly. Right? And then basically every customer we've encountered, even when PGP or SWIME is their priority, it still makes sense that there is a fallback delivery, right? They should and will test out the portal, test out PDF.
Some customers may not want that, right?
And they don't have to use it, but it's included. So why not send a test message?
Can I send a particular message, a single message out? Does it have to go PGP to everybody, or what happens if some people don't have PGP and some do?
Exactly. Well, that's the beauty of the fallback, right? We take that message, we know it needs encryption, we do PGP when we can, and rather than have to bounce it back for other cases.
The point is, like, if you have, if I'm sending a message out to 3 recipients, so in the law firm's situation, right, they may have one client who's insisting on PGP encryption, and the other 2 recipients are portal. That message doesn't have to be PGP or not PGP. That message can be PGP for one recipient, but then fall back portal for the other 2. So that ability to split a message based on channel, that PGP versus portal versus TLS, that ability to sort of deliver it in different ways based on recipients' capabilities is kind of key. That's kind of unique, again, to EchoWorks, that ability to not just trigger and encrypt, but to trigger and encrypt based on recipients' capability. It can be very critical in terms of defining your message policies and encryption rules.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll recommend, as part of that baseline testing, that we're going to set up just a simple route. A message comes from the customer's gateway to EchoWorks. It can be encrypted into the portal very easily. Confirm that the notifications are being delivered, that the customer's gateway gets that route back. And then you layer on the extra encryption. So then you're in a better position to add a PGP key into the platform and see that type of encryption go. So
now we get our policies all defined.
Yeah, that's really, it's all about collecting the business requirements as we go as well. They're going to realize, oh yeah, we do. Look at this. We've got this 6-year-old rule sitting over here in our old appliance that does something special for a partner domain. Right. Can we do that? And so we're adding in that business logic and those policies as we're doing the baseline testing. We're also configuring the branding.
So branding is another key
footers
thing.
Right? We mentioned.
And how difficult is it for us to do branding? You want to talk a bit to that?
Basic branding is like just a couple day turnaround, right?
It's quick,
at a fundamental level, we need a logo, we need a service name, we need to know the business colors, and we can fit that into all of the various templates and notifications in the platform.
And we also have sort of unlimited sort of branding capabilities. So although most customers are singularly branded, but branding by channel or by business unit is also possible, and those can be key things. So we've got a system set up. We've got routing, we've got rules, we've got branding. So now, what are the sort of 2 or 3 steps in around?
Right. So sort of the baseline testing is there. It's connected. We know that we have mail flow. We've looked at the different branding points, and with PGP specifically, there are some notifications that you don't see any other time, like an invitation email out to a recipient.
Upload public certificates.
Hey, you've click here to upload your certificate. That can have particular disclaimers or instructions, the logo. So we're going to go through all of those flows and help the customer define sort of that test plan, so that they see everything before they're going live.
Right. Excellent.
And then now the big step. Let's talk about actually migrating the keys.
Right. Yeah.
And this is what is kind of unique for a PGP migration, or SMIME as well. So 2 aspects to that. First one is a pretty easy one: the enterprise signing key that will exist already in the legacy PGP server, an enterprise key that can sign if there's no user key. And that enterprise key is special too in the sense that it can sign all of the auto-generated keys in EchoWorks, and it gives you a little bit of chain of trust, so to speak.
So it's just to explain that a little bit. So it's kind of like in the different, one of the main fundamental differences between PGP and SMIME is SMIME has a certificate authority that's usually a trusted root that everybody has in their key store that lets you trust a certificate. Under PGP, pretty good protection, it kind of dispensed with that and created this concept of web of trust. But it also then allows, say, as enterprise certificate to sign all the end user certificates, kind of giving you that same kind of CA kind of role, but not really. But what it means then is if I'm an enterprise and all my certs are signed by an enterprise certificate, if I'm doing, again, B2B kind of thing, I can trust the enterprise cert and by extension trust the user cert, because then now we know that it all comes from the same spot. Exactly. So it's kind of mimicking that sort of CA role, the root certificate there. And it can be very key because if that same enterprise cert's already trusted by other organizations, they're going to expect to see it. So that's why it's kind of an important part.
And so how does it actually happen? Well, obviously, an admin console, right? So the IT team, the administrators that we're working with to do this migration, they'll be logging into their old console. They'll be exporting that key into a file, and then they'll be logging into the EchoWorks admin console. They'll see the button to import enterprise key, and they'll upload it. So that means that no private keys have been like emailed around or sent to support or anything like that. The customer is enabled with the tools to kind of do this migration almost themselves. They're just going to need some advice and
guidance,
hand-holding a little bit along the way.
It's pretty straightforward.
So then next, after enterprise key, then we're talking about all the actual user keys that are in that legacy
this is
appliance.
both private and
public. And
private key pairs.
There is an important differentiator there, right? You're going to have a set of keys that are just third-party, external, public recipients.
Right.
Those are all the keys that they've harvested over the years and saved in. So those should be exported out as just a sort of blob of public keys.
And that's something you do directly. I mean, we're talking specifically kind of PGP Universal certainly has that functionality. It's a capability in most PGP servers or software. So it should just be there, right? But if you get it out, we have an ability to get it in.
And then sort of most important is going to be those public-private key pairs. So those also should be exported out separately into a file that actually has the private keys in it. And again, they're not copying that or sending that around anywhere. They're taking that important secret asset,
Directly importing.
and then importing it right away into EchoWorks. And a little pro tip, it's best if those files only have about 500 keys or less, so that there's no issues with like this massive amount of
small
data
bytes,
being copied
small
around.
bytes, yeah.
So I mean, when we see migrations usually are a few thousand keys, then it's not a big deal to split that into a few files.
Right, great. So let's talk a bit. So we've kind of got the keys in. So what are the 4 or 5 steps left then to kind of go? So we've set up the system, policies are there, branding is there, signing keys are there, private keys have been moved in. So now we're kind of ready to kind of complete the migration process. So so let's talk about those next set of steps.
So I mean, again, very simply, this is pretty turnkey in the EchoWorks console, where you're going to enable some features like the PGP private key generation, so that all new senders, or when those existing keys start rolling over, the platform's going to auto-generate keys.
So if we import an existing key and it's going to expire in 6 weeks or 6 months, we'll automatically generate the new key for the sender.
And that literally is a checkbox in the console to
And the old key still sits in the system, and the new key becomes the active key. So any existing inbound messages that might use the old key is still available for decryption. So that whole key management is just built into the platform. What about third-party lookups? Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. So the EchoWorks platform is already going to know about some of the universal key repositories and where to fetch.
These essentially directories,
X509 certificates, where to fetch
like the Yellow
PGP
Pages.
keys. Like you mentioned, Bank of England. I think at one
Bank of England's a big one.
So they're going to have a public directory posted out there. The EchoWorks platform should be looking for PGP keys there already. But when you come along, you may know of some other third-party LDAPs that you've been searching,
or your customers' LDAPs.
And you need EchoWorks to search those as well, and that's no problem at all. You just let us know the address of those directories. We add it into the configuration to start searching more places to find keys.
And we actually make those directories very sort of smart. Those search things, like we can add directories in for customers. So for instance, we added Siemens in for Lex Auto. And in that directory, we default the LDAP to look up the certificates, but we say only when the domain is siemens.co. or siemensco.uk, so that we only look up when it's relevant, right? Rather than searching every directory for every email address, you want to be efficient about it. So EchoWorks allows for that. And that's something you provide to an engagement team, they get it configured, and then you basically check it off as a setting.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So now you're really close to being able to send and receive PGP messages at this point. So a couple of optional things that this is not specific to PGP, but how are the staff, how are the internal users initiating encryption? Do they want the EchoWorks add-in? So that's always part of onboarding, part of
the add-in,
the EchoWorks platform is
the add-in allows you to basically trigger the encryption, but we can make that extensible. That's configurable. That's another thing. Actually, everything about the platform is configuration first, right? So encryption triggers could be simple as a button, or you can be very specific and allow the end user actually to determine what encryption types to be allowed with a particular message.
And keywords obviously have probably been configured already. There's probably some keywords we added into the system for test.
Yes.
Right? PGP test,
special routing
test, or EchoWorks test, right? Customers get to choose what those keywords are. But before you're live, there's going to be that discussion of what are the production triggers. Right. So make sure that the production keywords are going in, and that maybe that test data or those test rules are sort of set aside in maybe a UAT environment, a test profile. So we can help a customer have like that test set of rules and those production rules.
Yep, absolutely. And so now we certainly want to test that outbound communication, but with SMIME, it's kind of key, or PGP, it's also key to test the inbound. That's a key aspect, right? Because there is that decryption of inbound messages. We need that communication to be two-way. And that would be the last step, right? Is to verify that inbound communication and test those footers and headers that we've talked about earlier about verification of decryption.
That's right. So there's going to be a set of rules in the customer's gateway, not in EchoWorks, to get those outbound messages over to us. And then there's a separate set of rules for the inbound, right? Detect that inbound PGP message. And the gateway is going to typically have a pretty simple checkbox is PGP or something like that, right? Where the customer doesn't have to define all of the headers to look for.
But they're not really that complicated.
But we can help them tell them what those headers are.
They're not that complicated, but it's always nice to have a predefined rule that does it. But
and something we help with and talk about very early on in Mailflow is preventing loops.
Yes.
Because we don't want a message going from the gateway over to EchoWorks back to the gateway, and then the gateway says,
Yeah.
"Oh, I better send this to EchoWorks."
Yeah, but EchoWorks helps you mitigate that quite
So yeah,
readily.
we know exactly what headers and loop detection we're going to help them.
Any traffic that comes to EchoWorks that's been encrypted will include very specific tags that we've processed it. So it's very clear in your site gateway that we've already processed the message and you shouldn't loop it back. And again, we've been doing this for basically about 18 years, so we're really well versed in sort of how this all gets set up and stuff like that. So that's a good breakdown. We've talked about a lot of details. Now, I know your mileage may vary, but let's talk a little bit about what is that migration. We've talked about all these individual steps.
How long do they take? Right?
So from an engagement perspective, again, like I said, mileage does vary based on complexity and customer needs. But in an optimum kind of thing, let's talk a bit about some timelines here. So maybe you want to.
So somebody who's sitting down to create a project plan for migration, and again, the migration of keys, the PGP specific steps is kind of one step in the overall project plan. So we should sort of talk about overall, how long is it going to take to go live on EchoWorks?
Yeah.
And obviously, we would establish that project planning early on, kickoff meeting, get all the stakeholders involved, who needs to do what. So you can assume a couple of days to get everyone organized.
Yep.
Then you're right into the service configuration and discovery, where the customer is learning all the options in EchoWorks, turning on different delivery methods, that branding. So that is, in its simplest form, 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
The customer's like, oh yeah, I want kind of all your defaults. Check. I want all these things. We have a bit of a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But that can prolong. Right?
Yeah.
Customers sometimes need to take time considering the options, getting approvals, engaging different internal stakeholders. So when I say it can be done in 2 to 3 days, that's best case. And it's really a customer-driven project. Right? We're just here to assist and make everything go smoothly.
I often say when I talk to customers about timelines, is we usually can implement a customer in as short as 2 to 3 days, but it's
but
because
it won't be 2 to 3
but it
days.
won't be 2 to 3 days because it's really, I mean, we're trying to get a production system. It does require a lot of review. There's privacy reviews, there's wording reviews, there's compliance reviews, and that's all part of setting up the service, right? Service configuration, right?
Yeah. So giving the actual branding and provisioning team a chance to create the branded tenant and all that specific configuration. That's a couple days there.
But if it's just a POC and we're not worried about full approvals, we can basically get a system up and running in a few days.
In that case, right? Yeah, that's right. So then that integration and baseline testing we talked about, that's for sure. Establishing together the test plan, showing recommended tests, giving you, the customer, time to execute that. You're going to be fitting this into your busy schedule already. You're probably going to have a few hours a week to dedicate to
there's a lot of support. There's a lot of support through this process too, right? That's where the engagement team really steps up and is sort of there 7x24 to help you get through it.
So I'd say from start to finish, all the integration testing is a day, but it's likely happening over the process of a
week or two.
And then you're into the migration of keys.
Yeah.
So
it's really, when you look at it, the baseline scheduling, like the branding is a key component. The migration of keys is also a big component, right? Particularly, I think that number is really short if we're talking, small amounts of keys. But if it's a larger enterprise with thousands of keys, spending a week to 2 weeks on that, because you're right, it's very critical information, it's sensitive information, and approvals and the process is probably going to be well vented and take time. So that's something you'd want to plan for, I think, for sure.
So, I mean, we'll estimate anywhere, 5-8 business days.
Yeah.
But again, it's customer driven. They go at their pace, and we're supporting them along the way.
Yeah. I guess if you do everything right, we're talking about training and then acceptance testing, that 3 to 7 days, I mean, it depends how well we set up the service, but that could be very fast, I would think, if you've done everything. And particularly if it's a POC that's going into production versus just a POC and then you're redoing production, right? So
that's very common, that the POC becomes production. I mean, they've gone to all that effort. They've done all their mail flow. They've tested it all. Let's not throw it away.
No.
Right?
Ideally.
Let's turn that into the live environment for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, because EchoWorks is a multi-tenant environment, so that the POC our POC environment can be your pre-production environment, and you basically you're validating the statement of capability, you're validating the use cases. But if we set it up right, if you do the right work, that work is never lost, right? We can literally have it either it's ready to be turned on, or with additional approvals and approvals, it can be upgraded and made live. So really that time, if you do a POC with EchoWorks, we can basically turn that into a production environment by addressing any gaps or usability things. Great. That's
there you have
awesome.
it. Migrating.
1, 2, 3.
PGP. Yeah.
So, I mean, we can answer some questions, but just to summarize some of the key points, EchoWorks can help you migrate your current encryption, PGP encryption solution that may be on-prem to the cloud. We've done that for many key customers like Clydesdale and Bird and Bird and Clifford and Chance, it's just to name a few, as well as, we got people like Citigroup using it and NTT Securities. So we're very well versed in doing this. We can take the same capability and put it in the edge, taking the responsibility of managing that hardware, managing software updates and patches, and keeping that services running. And the upside of that, of course, is that it can also provide additional message encryption options as well, but we can still tailor it to your particular business needs. So we kind of encourage you to reach out and talk to us about how we can help you out or doing that thing, or even answer some questions about message encryption as a whole.
Yeah, one thing we find is that once they get over that hurdle and they've got the PGP configured in the cloud, they realize, oh, wow, we can send so many more messages securely than we used to, because it's not just about PGP. It's about all these other great delivery methods to really reach out to the masses. And the PGP ends up becoming a small percentage of the total number of emails encrypted, whereas before with that legacy server, it may have been the only time they encrypt or the only reason they encrypt.
Yeah, and I think the benefit then of the platform is that you're using EchoWorks. You have one message encryption. Like I said, EchoWorks strives to be the omni-channel for message encryption. And so the last thing you want is a general B2C solution, which EchoWorks offers, obviously, but then you need this very specific B2B requirement, and you have to get a third party or yet another platform to support it. It can be done in one fundamental channel or one fundamental platform. And that's what we think. We'd love to have a conversation with you. And Tara, thank you very much for your time.
Reach out.
Today.
We're here.
Yeah, we're here.